Now, one of Britain's most successful businessmen has branded gap years a waste of time. Sir Martin Sorrell believes a year between leaving school and going to university doesn't help teenagers expand their horizons because they're often badly organised and depend on what he calls serendipity. So is Sir Martin right? Let's discuss this with Marcus Watts, the founder of Gapforce, which organises volunteering and internships abroad, and Seamus Nevin, who's head of employment and skills policy at the Institute of Directors. They're both joining us from central London this afternoon. Seamus Nevin, why don't you kick us off? A gap year, worth it or not?
Absolutely. Numerous economists and academics have said that over the next 20 years, up to 50% of the jobs in the UK are at risk of automation by robots. At the same time, we find a number of medical studies showing that British people are staying healthier and living longer and consequently working longer than ever before. The result of these two trends combined together mean that lifelong learning, retraining and upskilling while in the workforce will become increasingly important. And a gap year is really the first chance for a young person to take responsibility for their own personal and professional development. So for those reasons, it's hugely valuable.
Marcus Watts, it depends what you do during that gap year, doesn't it?
I agree, yes. The key thing is actually working out what gap year you're going to go on. If you're going to lie on the beach for 6 months, there's probably limited benefit. But if you're going onto a gap year, for example, where you're going to be teaching in a school or you're going to be actually operating on your own with a level of responsibility, as Seamus says, it's your first stepping stone of acting as an adult as opposed to being a child.
Lying on the beach, you say it has limited value. It has zero value, does it?
For your career, I agree, yes. So what we're talking about and what Martin Sorrell was pointing out is there is quite a difference between the unstructured gap year and the professional gap year. And the professional gap year, as Seamus rightly says, is a key part of the first step in their career, developing interpersonal skills, learning how to actually live as an adult. For many, it will be the first time they've lived away from home.
Indeed so, but I mean a professional gap year, just to pick you up on your phrase, sounds like it could be too organised. If everything is put in place, that serendipity, which Martin Sorrell admits could be useful and character forming, just simply won't happen.
If you're put in front of a classroom of children, say in Africa, and your job is to be an assistant teacher, and you're going to do it every day for 3 to 4 weeks, I guarantee you every day will be different, despite how much work Gapforce puts in to try and reduce the levels of risk for you. Now, what I'm saying is a structured gap year will reduce the level of risk, so you're safe, but also ensure that you land on the Sunday and Monday morning you're doing something useful rather than wasting time. So you're maximising your time. You'll still have learning opportunities every day on your gap year.
Seamus Nevin, are these structured gap years affordable or are they actually quite expensive?
Well, really what matters is that a student or a young person takes responsibility for developing skills that they need and enhancing their own CV. There are various gap year schemes available. Some people choose not to take formal schemes at all. They take responsibility themselves working in charities or with a startup or maybe even founding a business themselves. Really what matters is, again, inculcating a sense of self-awareness and responsibility so that a student can look at their own experiences and see where they maybe have shortcomings and where they need to develop and grow.
We dismiss the lying on a beach, but that experience often is you run out of money, you therefore have to get a work, you have to go and, pitch for some work in a bar or something. That in itself surely can be useful.
Well, I think there can be some kind of caricatures of gap years, and there's often this lying on the beach is one example. I would give young people the benefit of the doubt. I think most people take responsibility and try and develop themselves in new ways, have new experiences, as I said, working for a charity, teaching, travelling abroad, etc. But as you say, sometimes travelling, the chance to meet new people and engage at new cultures and develop the kind of softer skills that employers really value, things like communication, team working, and time management. These are skills that are very hard to teach in a formal educational environment and can really only be developed through life experiences.
Marcus, how important is it that the student, the person who is undertaking this gap year, is literally taken out of their comfort zone? How demanding should these experiences be?
It obviously will depend on the individual, depends on the student. What is demanding for one student may not be for another. But that is such a useful point, is that getting them to live on their own, it means that things going forward, if they are going to university, if they've lived on their own in Africa for, say, a couple of months, they're more likely to be stickier at university, i.e. stay at university, because they've lived independently already before they go. And that's the key thing, as I was saying about the gap year, how it is that kind of first step in their developing career. And to touch on your point about affordability, with lots of organisations like ourselves, we'll actually secure them work for, say, 3 to 6 months overseas, and then go on to a more kind of formalised element of their gap year. So a gap year can effectively be free. It can be self-funding.
Is it necessarily this, you limit students who are definitely going to do university? Because, of course, the opportunities at 18 are much more varied, and there's a separate discussion, if you like, about do you necessarily go the university route? You know, apprenticeships for a whole tranche of young people might be more appropriate.
Definitely, and I think that's one of the benefits of the gap year. There are much more opportunities than there were 20, 30 years ago. For example, we run programs where they're a 4-month course and then there's guaranteed jobs in adventure travel afterwards. So for people who maybe aren't academic, there's opportunities there, as well as career-focused gap years. One's for doctors, if you want to study law, there's legal opportunities we have working in courts in Africa. So it can be, if you're totally focused on a career, there's an opportunity for you there. If you're unsure about your career and maybe don't want to go to university, there's a gap year opportunity for you there as well.
And Seamus Nevin, is there real hard evidence? I hear what you say about, of course, this can boost your self-esteem, it can boost your soft skills, but is there actually hard evidence that it makes you more employable at the end?
Absolutely. There are numerous surveys from employers that show there is increasing concern about the lack or the shortage of soft skills and workplace readiness amongst graduates, and I think that's borne out by the government's own statistics. 30% of graduates are still in graduate or entry-level positions 5 years after they graduate. The fact that young people are entering the workforce but are not getting on once they start is quite worrying, not only for them personally but also for the economy as a whole. So developing the softer side of skills is something that's very valuable to employers. It's one thing having students with excellent technical knowledge, but if they're not able to apply that in the workplace, then that can stifle their career and be damaging for their personal growth and productivity prospects. I think if you look at increasingly employers-based surveys, including members of the IOD, show that the skills gap and soft skills in particular is their number one concern right now, and that's again particularly borne out amongst our younger members, the IOD 99, who are typically startups and entrepreneurs. You know, if you go to work in a startup, you're not typically working in one particular role. You have to work across the board because these are small companies where everybody has to take responsibility for various elements of that company's growth. So having a broad-based skills, being able to work in teams, time management, following instructions, resilience, resourcefulness, self-awareness, these kind of things are hugely important to employers.
Seamus Nevin, thank you, and Marcus Watts, thank you too.
Thank you.
The Republican frontrunner Donald Trump has rejected claims that he is responsible for violence at his rallies. It follows a series of incidents at campaign events. These pictures are from Chicago on Friday. Yesterday, Mr. Trump told the rally